Construction insolvency, builders, homeowners, and the collapse of fixed price certainty. Welcome to IO Insolvency Options with Darren Vardy, the Managing Director of Insolvency Options and a registered liquidator with over 30 years of experience helping businesses and individuals navigate financial challenges. In today's episode, Darren examines the wave of insolvencies impacting the construction industry and explains the flow-on effect for homeowners, trades, suppliers, and the broader housing market. He shares lessons from project home builder collapses, including the importance of homeowner warranty insurance, the dangers of payments made ahead of work completed, and why fixed price contracts may need to evolve. I'm your co-host Anthony Pearl. Let's dive into unlocking more about insolvency options. Darren, we come to a topic probably a little bit too near and dear to my heart, as you know. The construction industry really is one of the big ones that has had not just been impacted in terms of the number that have been going under and well publicised in many cases, but the impact that then has as a flow on to not just the people who might be building, but all of the suppliers that are connected to these construction companies along the way. It's a big issue at the moment at a time when a government is trying to generate more housing rather than less.
Yeah, look, at the moment, according to the government, we're in a housing crisis. There is a lack of supply, and the government is throwing a lot of resources at trying to rectify that situation. But unrelated to that, but impactful of that, is some recent failures of some large project homes. And no doubt these project home builders were probably integral to fixing the supply issue by building new dwellings on the land that has been sort of released by the various government departments to enable communities to be built. And as probably the largest one of late is Beechwood Homes. We've got Port Davis Homes as well. And, you know, what we're finding is with those, a significant impact, yes, on the trades and the suppliers and the tax debt. But we're also finding a significant impact on the homeowner and on the customer. And particularly with the Beechwood Homes matter, where it became clear that one customer had paid $400,000, pretty much all of the build to Beechwood Homes, where in circumstances where not a shovel of soil had been turned. And when the company was placed into liquidation, it's also understood that there may not have been homeowners warranty insurance policy in place, albeit that as part of a contract, they'd no doubt paid for one, because a homeowner's warranty insurance is required for all building over $20,000. But to hear that a policy doesn't exist, in my view, is criminal, let alone taking someone's, hard-earned, saved money where there has simply been no works done whatsoever.
And I think the challenge for people in this scenario is that you're completely reliant on what will happen in insurance. And often it's a big waiting game then.
It is. I was appointed to a smaller project home builder back in 2023, a company by the name of Unison Homes. Now, I can say that of the $3 million creditor pool that existed, $2.2 million were claims of homeowners. Now, in that instance, there were probably two customers that didn't have homeowners warranty insurance that had been purchased by the company. However, the monies paid by those particular homeowners weren't overly substantial. No doubt that they were substantial to them, but in the whole scheme of things, they weren't a large amount of money that they were out of pocket for. And in fact, I recall that the funds paid were funds paid very close to the time of liquidation to enable homeowners warranty insurance to be obtained. And you may be talking, costs of somewhere between, $3,000 and $7,000. So yes, it's a lot to the homeowner, but in the whole scheme of things, it's not a large loss. It could be a lot worse. But in my view, the issue we have, I think it's a systemic issue with home building contracts. It enables payments and significant payments to be made in advance. And I think that needs to be looked at to the extent that customers, mums and dads, homeowners are covered by virtue of, before anything happens, payment is made for a homeowner's insurance policy. Maybe that payment needs to go direct to the government department who controls the provision of homeowner warranty insurance. So the money doesn't go through the company per se, the building company. But that being said, before anything happens on a home building contract, there needs to be evidence, in my view, that a policy exists just in case there is a financial issue with the builder throughout the project timeframe.
I think the lack of flexibility in some of the contracts makes it incredibly difficult because it's very much in favour of the builder. And that's where the issues then lie. As you say, you're paying in advance. And if the builder fails to deliver or fails to pay a supplier for that and it isn't delivered, it's the customer who loses out. And often, as we're talking about here, if it's in the final stages, it can mean the difference between getting an occupancy certificate and not. And if you don't have the occupancy certificate, you're paying rent on a place and waiting for long processes to be enabled and slowly creating huge amount of financial and mental anguish for people who are innocent parties in it all.
Correct. And that's where the contract is, for want of a better term, dictated by the builder. They are often always loaded at the front end, given the supplies that the builder needs to acquire, which makes sense. However, quite often we find when there is a failure during the process, more often than not, there has been more money paid than the value of the works completed, leaving the homeowner, customer, at a shortfall. And the whole purpose of homeowners warranty insurance is to cover that shortfall. And if that's not in place whatsoever, which is the whole purpose of that regime, well, then we've got a failure of the system.
I think the challenge, of course, is that the public demands a fixed price contract in these kinds of circumstances. And yet we've seen what's happened in the world over the past 2 or 3 years. So if you signed a contract 2-3 years ago and it's taken that long for it to go through the process, it's the building company that's potentially wearing a whole heap of extra costs, which is hurting its cash flow and having this flow-on effect with all of that. And that's the challenge, isn't it? I mean, what was it like when you went into the company that you looked after through this process? Was that a real impact as well?
At the time, given that it was January 23, that was certainly their major issue. You know, we had building product costs going up by 30%. It was right off the back of COVID. They were trading right through COVID, fixed price contracts. The margin that they did have, which is generally a very slim margin, was just eroded and overtaken by the increasing costs of product.
So talk me through what the process was like, because I think everyone listening in will be interested to know at what point were you actually called in and what was it like both on for the side of the owners of that company, but then also both the suppliers and the customers. How did that process play out and what did it look like?
I think it's fair to say that I was brought in far too late. The business owners were optimistic that they could, for want of a better term, ride the storm. And they were optimistic that once COVID had settled and the impacts of COVID had settled, that they would be back to pre-COVID time. And what they found was something very different. Where during the COVID period, those prices went up and they stayed up. I guess it's not dissimilar to what we've seen recently with the fuel prices, but the prices didn't come back and therefore had a significant impact in their whole business model. And they actually found that their business model needed significant changes and they could not do the, for want of a better term, mass production of properties, dwellings, with the costings and the contract prices that they were advertising and entering into.
And what does it look like in terms of, paint me that picture of the owners. Firstly, you've come and opened the door. What does it look like for them in that process?
The property owners?
No, they're the owners of the business initially.
Sure. So the owners of the business effectively in this case got to a stage where they didn't have any cash flow coming in on the projects to enable the purchase of materials and to continue with the ongoing trade. So they really found themselves in a position where they simply had no cash left to deal with anything. So every option that may have been available to them was off the table by virtue of the fact that they left it to the 11th hour to seek. some guidance and advice.
And where did they end up post all of this?
Obviously, the company was in liquidation, went into liquidation in early January. We completed the liquidation by about the middle of August. The directors, I believe, also had a number of personal guarantees for which they've had to try and deal with. And I recall that they may have actually just been made personally bankrupt.
So then now let's look at it in terms of the suppliers. Who gets what first and when, and how much did it look like for the suppliers in this?
Well, given the nature of the business, there were no employees. They contracted all their suppliers out. So all their trades, all their contractors were all unsecured creditors who lined up with the ATO. But given that we had 10 to 12 incomplete projects that were unable to be finished, there was no income or no money coming in from the completion of those. So there was no assets recovered. Therefore, there was no return back to the trade creditors and all the tax office.
And so then when it came to all the people who were their customers, what did the process look like? I gather that, it starts with day one when you're appointed. What does that process like for them?
So we were fortunate enough that these guys had some really good records. So as soon as we got appointed, we issued a notice to all the homeowners advising them of our appointment and that their recourse was as against any homeowner warranty insurance that existed at the time. As I indicated earlier, there was only 2 customers that didn't have a policy in place. So for the money they paid, which was not overly significant, they were an unsecured creditor of the company lining up next to the trade creditors and the ATO. Whereas with the balance of the customers who had the benefit of a homeowner's warranty insurance policy, they were able to make a claim against the Home Building Compensation Fund and then deal with them to get their build completed.
Talk to me about this whole idea as well, that we live in a society that has been very much built on you have to own your own home. We've got lots of TV shows out there about renovation and construction. It's a passion for a lot of Australians to want to do that. There's a lot of people that step into that property development space, whether it's just flipping a home or living in one for a little while and then turning it around, or to bigger scale developments. What's the blight on the industry at the moment? What's the future of it? Because the volume of businesses that have fallen into administration is significant in this space.
Yeah, I think the blight on the industry at the moment is that there is a supply issue. Is there enough builders to meet the supply issue? And the answer to that is no. And we've seen that with the increase in demand for these trades, which has in turn resulted in an increase in their rates. How do you fix the issue? Well, I think the government does need to have a good look at it. And it all comes down to, in my view, how we match up the supply needs with the resources that we have. And, we've seen of late, particularly in the construction industry, where there has been some small failures of builders through no fault of their own. But the allowance or the ability, even going through a restructure program and a turnaround, the ability to obtain ongoing homeowner warranty insurance for their clients is actually being restricted by the very people who want the supply built. So the government, in my view, needs to have a good look at that. And yes, where there has been builders who have taken money and essentially ripped people off, yes, they should be rubbed out. But I think where there are good builders through no fault of their own, just a set of circumstances where they've had an insolvency event, they've got the support of their creditors to do a turnaround, in my view, they need to be given the ability to obtain ongoing homeowners warranty insurance. Because if they don't, how do they successfully complete a turnaround? So there's a few different forces operating against the greater good, which in my view needs to be looked at and dealt with.
Just to wrap up this conversation, because I think we could talk for a long time about this sector, but I think there are 2 things that strike me is it the death of fixed price contracts? Is that something that has to be a thing of the past? And secondly, the warning around insurance. It's not like it covers 100% either, and insurance prices indeed could rise as a result of all of this as well. So that also has an impact.
Fixed price contracts, I think it's too difficult to quote a fixed price contract these days when there are delays beyond the control of in the supply chain and the additional costs through the supply chain, which can come up. So I do think that fixed price contracts may become a thing of the past. The benefit of a do and charge contract is that the homeowner is on top of and getting assessed regularly the value of the work's done. So they're only paying for the value of the work's done, and there's some comfort in that. Does it cost more? I think there's arguments both sides of the fence on that, but it's certainly less risky and more controllable. Although with fixed price contract, you generally have a time frame for getting work done, which you can hold the builder to and seek damages if they fail to complete within time. You don't have that luxury with a do and charge contract, as the standard do and charge contract agreement sits. So I think we'll end up finding over the efflux of time a bit of a hybrid where some of the fixed price contract terms will come into play, such as time delays, scheduling and the like, albeit works will be done on a cost plus basis with a fair estimate at the beginning as to what it will be. So I think there is an opportunity to get to that hybrid contract model, which has protection mechanisms for both parties. And I guess we'll just have to sit back and wait and see how that goes.
And just lastly on that, just a point that I made, insurance, you need to be aware that it doesn't cover 100%.
Correct. Absolutely, it doesn't. I know with the Unison Homes matter, I looked this up. The maximum threshold of the indemnity at that time was $340,000 per claim. Looking at another one at the moment, which is a job I got appointed to recently, home builder, not a project home builder, but just a small home builder. His indemnity threshold on appears to be around the $225,000 per claim. So no, it doesn't. And it's not there to cover the completion of your building. It's there to cover the additional costs that you are out of pocket.
Well, that's all for this episode of IO Insolvency Options, but next time we'll begin a detailed look at retail insolvency through the Mosaic brand story. Darren's going to explain how household retail names can still collapse under the weight of aggressive expansion, stretched supplier payments, COVID disruption, rent pressure, and deteriorating cash flow. It's a powerful reminder that size and brand recognition do not guarantee financial strength. We've created a workbook for this episode of the podcast with some questions for you to answer, key quotes, and action steps to follow. Check out the show notes for the link to download your copy. For details on how to get in touch with Darren and his team on insolvency challenges, please also consult the show notes. This podcast is produced by my team at podcastdoneforyou.com.au, helping professionals share their expertise through powerful podcast content. If you found value in today's episode, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to IO Insolvency Options. Until next time, remember, there's always a way forward when you know your options.